Education is a powerful thing to obtain. Knowledge can change the world, character can change hearts. Every child deserves an education that is going to benefit their lives, but in the city of Chicago, there is a serious problem. Children are not getting that kind of education. There needs to be a positive change in the Chicago public school system, and every student deserves to go to a school that is safe and will benefit their education. For a school to be successful, there needs to be multiple advanced placement courses available, and students are taking these courses and passing them. Graduation rate is above 90%. The school offers extracurricular activities, which help students be well-rounded. Teachers are experienced, and the learning environment is an enjoyable place to be in. Chicago suburban schools are extremely successful, but why aren't the city schools? The top 10 suburban schools are St. Charles, Barrington, Wheaton, Hinsdale, Highland Park, Naperville, Vernon Hills, Glenview, Northfield, and Lincolnshire. The families living in these areas are predominantly white and are middle to upper middle class. There are many school districts across the country that are struggling to support their students, similar to the situation in Chicago. On the other hand, there are many school districts that are well-funded and thriving, like in the Chicago suburbs. In any instance, the most successful schools all have commonalities: money for resources and good teachers, a large number of advanced placement courses, and exams, and numerous sports and clubs to keep their students well-rounded throughout the academic career. Starting off, CPS schools are not successful because of the school system poverty as well as student poverty. Another reason is that the schools are in awful conditions and lack resources. Children cannot thrive educationally under the conditions that the schools are in. In Chicago, 85% of students are either Black or Latino. In 77 out of 680 schools in the city, 99% of students qualify as poor or low income. In 388 schools, it is 90%, and in only 50 schools, the percent is less than half. Since the majority of the students attending these schools are coming from low-income families, they need support and resources from their schools, especially because they are not getting it at home. Because of the lack of resources, though, these children aren't getting the support they need. A new study by the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless suggests that many homeless youth are not benefiting from the educational services they deserve. The study found that more than half of the known homeless youth did not gain access to preschool schooling, counseling, public benefits, tutoring, and help with long-term housing. In fact, the study suggests that about 44% of the school districts admitted a shortage in capacity to identify and enroll homeless youth into schools. These findings suggest that there is a huge shortage of resources that deal with the homeless students in Chicago. Not only are these schools lacking support and resources, but the schools themselves are in awful conditions. An article called 5 Facts You Need to Know About the Terrible State of Chicago Schools highlights 5 major facts into how deprived CPS schools are. First, class sizes are the largest in the state. Class sizes can well exceed 40-plus students, whereas in the districts such as Matson, the average classroom size is 16 students and no larger than 23. Second, students in CPS schools do not receive access to arts and music education. Only 25% of Chicago's public elementary schools have both an art and music instructor. Third, there is a severe lack of social workers and counselors. Over 15,000 homeless children attend Chicago's public schools, yet there are only 370 social workers for the entire district. That is 42 children per social worker, not taking into account the children that are homeless and do not report it. As for counselors, each school has only one. A school with over 1,000 kids only has one adult available to them offering counseling services. Fourth, 160 schools do not even have libraries. Libraries give kids, especially impoverished children, access to information that they could possibly not be able to obtain anywhere or anyway else. And finally, fifth, Chicago does not provide free public transportation for students. This leads to absences, children walking through unsafe neighborhoods, and leaving working parents scrambling to somehow get their child safely to school. According to a quote from Chicago Teacher Union, 42% of Chicago's elementary schools lack full funding for arts and music teachers, even though the Department of Education calls arts and music education practically beneficial for students from economically disadvantaged circumstances and those who are at risk of not succeeding in school. Chicago schools also lack adequate funding and equipment for physical education. Only 13% of middle school principals reported having enough physical education resources for their students in 2011. Many of Chicago's lowest performing schools are crumbling, but Chicago Public Schools acknowledged last year that it won't invest in improvement projects for schools it expects to be closed in the next 5 to 10 years, instead focusing on other schools, including those that share faculties with the charter schools. Here's a video of Governor Rauner discussing the conditions of our schools.
Today, Governor Rauner and Mayor Emanuel were back at it, trading nasty barbs. The war of words escalated when the governor said this.
When you look objectively at the status of Chicago public schools, many of them are inadequate, many of them are woeful, and some are just tragic. Many of them are basically almost crumbling prisons.
During my research, I interviewed a family friend who has taught at John H. Kinsey Elementary School in Chicago for 24 years. Teachers are some of the only adults who get to witness what it is like to attend CPS schools and what it is like inside the classrooms. When asked, she explained the many hardships that impoverished students face. She went into detail about how kids come to school hungry, only getting the one meal a day provided to them at the school. Kids come with dirty clothes or do not own clothes for the cold weather. Some have not bathed or brushed their teeth for days. She elaborates, in order to help these children learn, we first have to address the above issues. Students cannot pay attention if they are hungry, tired, and cold. Some come to school on the first day with no supplies, not even a pencil. When it comes to the school system in Chicago, she thinks that public schools do not get enough funding or support from the city, state, or local government. And instead of improving the public schools, the government will just close them and open charter schools. A problem with the charter schools, though, is that they can choose the students they want, and of course they aren't choosing the students with behavioral or family problems. Teaching in a school of need, she feels as a second parent to all of her students. As a teacher, she has brought in extra supplies and materials for kids to work with, made copies of worksheets and books so parents could practice with their children at home, and has even taught parents how to do the math or science so they could help their child with homework. As a second parent to her students, she has brought in clothes and extra food for children to eat and take home to their families. She has taken home students' dirty clothes so they could be washed. She has called psychologists, social workers, nurses, and doctors, trying to get needed medication, hearing aids, or glasses for children. Even after work, she answers her messages, texts, and phone calls from parents asking any questions. She knows there is not much else teachers can do. These children need help from their families and communities, and shedding light onto the real personal witnessed accounts everyone else will know too. Chicago public schools are left in a never-ending cycle of failure, along with other city schools across the nation. Attempts have been made to fix city schools, but small success has shown because the measures taken to fix the problems are small themselves. The city of Chicago seems to think that closing a rundown school is a better option than improving it, and then give its funding to charter schools. But when a school closes, it leaves students scrambling to find a new school to attend, and the new one is probably just as insufficient as the last, having the uncertainty of remaining open or not. Extra funding is helpful to any school, but it is not going to fix all the problems, especially for schools in Chicago, which is a common misconception by the school systems. Most deteriorating city schools are deemed unfixable and left to fail. Every child, by law, has the right to receive an appropriate, free public education, and children in city schools like Chicago are not receiving that. The school system cannot rely on attempting to gain extra funds, closing schools down, or avoiding the situation. These three reasons are basically effortless attempts to try and fix the city schools. According to centerforpubliceducation.org, 5 essential building blocks for impoverished schools that strive to be successful are a culture of high expectations and caring for students, a safe and disciplined environment, a principal who is a strong instructional leader, hardworking and committed teachers, and a curriculum focused on academic achievement that emphasizes basic skill. In 1989, Union City School District in New Jersey was ranked next to last in the state. Today, scores are the best in the nation, with graduation rate of 89.4% and Union City High School ranking among the top 12% nationally. It's sending its students to top colleges. 99% of Union City students are minorities, and 94% of them are economically disadvantaged, yet the school is thriving. Turning the school district around was not done by taking measures such as closing schools or aimlessly trying to gain extra funding, and it definitely wasn't done by ignoring the problem either. The district instilled free preschool 6 hours a day, 245 days a year, which was taught by teachers with college degrees. They introduced and used a consistent curriculum across classrooms, and assessments in the school district measure students' critical thinking skills rather than the ability to memorize materials. Moving forward, Chicago needs to get the schools integrated instead of shutting down schools, so all students have access to efficient teachers and resources. The Chicago public school system needs to manage their money better so conditions for all students enable learning. Schools can provide access to high quality curriculum that is driven by assessment to improve the quality of education, and school systems can provide opportunities for teachers to reflect on student learning in order to differentiate and enhance the curriculum. As for the financial situation, moving teachers into 401k plan styles would be beneficial. Lawmakers need to better align state education spending going forward by enacting these following reforms on the screen. Enacting these reforms will go a long way toward fixing the state's education funding problems and the pension crisis. Every child deserves an education that is going to benefit them, especially children who are coming from impoverished homes. Not only the city of Chicago, but school systems everywhere need to ensure the security and well-being of their students. Teachers, parents, the community, state, country, and students themselves need to come together to fight for a better education for everyone.